What sort of sailboat company would you have if it was founded by not only an American Olympic sailor, but also a world champion? I have a scar on my back from my last experience on one of these boats, and I'm not really mad about it. Today on Everything You Need to Know, we're talking about the queen of the trailer sailors, O'Day. Lady K Sailing is brought to you by patrons, people who give a couple of bucks an episode to keep this channel improving. A big shout out to the newest members of the Lady K Patreon team, Moses, Jason, John, Shane, Steven, and Bill. Hi guys. The O'Day history isn't all that long or interesting, sadly, but they made some great boats and they did some very unique innovations along the way. George O'Day was an Olympic sailor and world champion in sailing when he founded O'Day in 1958. This is where the story kind of gets short. He founded O'Day in 1958, but then he sold the company in 1966, just 8 years later, and he sold it to a company called Bangor Punta, which to me sounds like a Korean off-road vehicle. I don't know. But that company, Bangor Punta, also bought Cal and Starcraft. Later, the whole shebang was actually bought by Lear Siegler. O'Day itself made a lot of really great boats, and I've been on several of them. But sadly, the company went out of business in 1989. George O'Day didn't just found that company, he also did something else that's really important for the sailing community and probably the most notable thing. He co-designed on a boat called the Day Sailor, which seems sort of on the nose. But the Day Sailor was inducted into the American Sailboat Hall of Fame, which is pretty cool. This was a 17-foot little racer with a 6-foot beam made out of fiberglass, with a small cuddy cabin that could sleep 2 people as long as those two people were pretty close. And of the Day Sailor, over 10,000 of these things were actually built, and there's one design races held all over the US for these things, and the boat is used in the Junior North American Championship to help get younger people into sailing, which is not a bad legacy to leave for Mr. George O'Day. The story of the Day Sailor is kind of interesting. George O'Day helped design it with a man called Uffa Fox. Uffa. I don't know. Uffa wanted to make a purebred race boat, open cockpit and open cabin and all that kind of stuff. But O'Day, being a world championship racer, insisted on a small cabin with room to sleep to increase the boat's ability to, I guess, sell to a more appealing audience, which is pretty smart. One of the most important things about the Day Sailor is that it was a planing hull, which means it's not limited by the laws of displacement like bigger sailboats. It could get up on top of the water and go like a bat out of hell, and it did. It only weighed 575 pounds too, so you could tow it literally with a bicycle. If you slap a little 2.5 Tohatsu on it, you're ready to rock, and you're ready to race. O'Day didn't just make small boats either. You've likely clicked on this YouTube video because you're interested in their medium range boats in the 30-foot area, but they did make boats right up to 40 feet. Their construction is sort of the same as everyone else in the era, glass with balsa core decks. So if you're looking at one of these boats, check for core rot and look for screw holes in the deck made by previous owners, because that stuff will compromise the balsa core. O'Day is, however, known to be of good build quality as long as that previous owner hasn't drilled a bunch of holes in the deck and turned the balsa core into mulch. Most of the O'Day boats hold up very well over time. They also tend to sail very well. They came with shoal draft keels and fin keel models. My personal experience with O'Day is on a few different boats, but mostly on my friend Chris's late 80s O'Day 272. And I think the 272 is a great example of what O'Day has to offer to our sailboat world. For its size, the 27-foot boat has standing headroom and a good-sized cockpit for entertaining. The 272 has a reasonable galley and cabin, a separate head, and a V-berth that'll sleep 2 adults. It really is what a 27-foot boat is meant to be. It also has a winged keel with the torpedo shape at the bottom with wings on the side. So it keeps it really shallow in draft, but it adds a lot of weight and it sails really nicely. And it's trailerable. We actually launched this thing off of the trailer, which is not bad for a 27-foot sailboat. So I have two stories about my friend Chris's boat. One of them is maybe slightly embarrassing. So first story, the previous owner had somehow gouged a big chunk out of the keel. And my friend Chris, being truly good at everything, because he is, wanted to replace the gouge of lead that was missing in the side of the keel. So he melted down some lead that he bought from somewhere, maybe 1948, and was sort of slathering it into the chunk of the keel that was missing with a torch. It started to rain while we were doing this, however, and apparently if water hits liquid lead while it's hot, all hell breaks loose. So there I was, helping, standing beside him with a fire extinguisher, and on his advice, ready to tackle him to get him out of harm's way. But ultimately, it worked. He did patch the chunk that was missing in the keel, and the boat sails on today. And so does Chris. The second story, and this is that one wasn't the embarrassing one. This one's the embarrassing one. And this is how I got my O'Day scar on my back. And I hate to let you guys down, but this isn't a crazy sailing story from the eastern seaboard in the Atlantic in a storm or some exhilarating race that I was in on an O'Day. No. Rather, it's a story of some rum and a raft off and a couple girls that I carry with me to this day. The scar, not the girls. Let me set the scene. Chris had the O'Day 272 and I had a CNC Redline 25. We were both racing a lot that summer and a lot of sailing happened. We wanted to spend the night out on the lake, so we brought our significant others and we sailed out. Chris anchored in the lake and I rafted up with him, so he was the hook boat and I tied on for the night. We lit the barbecue and had dinner in the cockpit of the O'Day because it is truly that roomy. The O'Day was so much more of a roomy boat. And after dinner we started with the rum drinks. By about midnight, we had told most of the sailing stories that we needed to tell to impress our significant others to a moderate degree, hopefully. It was my turn to go back to my boat to make a few more drinks for the group. And this is where the innovation and unique design of O'Day boats sort of comes into play in this story. My CNC and most sailboats have obviously a gunnel, the top of the sides of the boat, and the gunnel is flat and level, like where the winches are mounted. And if you wanted to step off the boat onto a dock per se, you would step on the level flat seat in the cockpit and then the level flat gunnel and not trip over the winch. It's all level, it's all safe, it's very easy. And then you would step down onto the dock. As my boat was tied to Chris's O'Day, I first had to step on his cockpit seat, his gunnel, my cockpit seat, and then I'm in my boat to make some more lovely drinks for us. However, the innovation of O'Day, the thing they came up with on the 272 and some other boats, was slanted seats and slanted gunnels. So a sailboat usually sails at a heel, as we know. So if the seats are flat and the boat starts to heel, you kind of slide out of them and you end up with your feet across on the other side. So what O'Day did was they raked the seats back. So when you're on a 20 or so degree heel, the seat would be level. But when the boat is level, it's sort of like sitting in a recliner because the seats are raked outward. And not just the seats, they obviously did the same thing to the gunnel. So when you step off the boat, the gunnel isn't level, it's raked. And when you've had some rum and don't remember that it's raked because it's dark, you end up with a scar on your back. So I stepped onto his seat, which made my body weight sort of plunge forward because the seat's raked outward. And I had to catch said weight with my next footing on the gunnel, which is also raked. And I fell hard. And I spun and I landed with the middle of my back on his stanchion, which is a stainless steel post. The stanchion pierced my skin immediately, ripped up my back right up to my shoulder, and to this day I have a scar on my back. At the time it was funny, but now I have a little bit of a beef with O'Day and their raked seats and raked gunnels. Now I tell that story to make a point, because while it didn't really work on that evening, I have been racing on this boat, and I've done a lot of sailing on this boat, and the rake of the should-be flat surfaces actually makes a lot of sense when you're trying to perform race duties in a race on this boat at a big heel in heavy weather. It's more stable, and I actually really do appreciate that. I mean, my back doesn't, but I do. The other thing about the 272 and a lot of O'Day boats is the built-in grip in the decks. It may come off as a little bit plasticky, but it helps when you're up on deck and everything's wet. The plasticky continues inside with a plastic headliner and a plastic interior liner. They do add wood here and there, but it still seems to feel a little bit plasticky. If I had to describe a sailboat to an alien, like, hey, here's a sailboat, this is what it is. Like, if we were to describe a car to an alien, you'd say Toyota Corolla, this is a car. It's not interesting in any way, but it is quintessentially what a car is. Corolla is a car. Well, for sailboats, O'Day is not that. I think the boring picture of what a sailboat is more likely like a Chrysler. And yes, Chrysler made boats, and they're boring. And yes, I can say that because I have had one. Maybe we'll do a really boring episode on Chrysler sailboats at some point. O'Day is what I would use as an example to describe to aliens of a sailboat that is better than normal. They took normal and sort of improved it in every place they could find to improve it. It's not the best, it's not the most comfortable, it's not the fastest, but it's innovative, it's slick, it's fairly well made, it's roomy, and it's good sailing. If I had to give advice to a new sailor or a newer sailor that wants to buy their second boat, so something from, say, 25 to 35 feet, and they're working their way up to bigger boats, O'Day would certainly be at the top of that list. Guys, thanks for watching. We talked a little while ago about hitting 20,000 subscribers, and we did it. And we said we were going to do an AMA and Ask Me Anything sort of episode. If you look back a little, I asked for all of your questions to be in the comments of that announcement episode. Well, we're going to do the AMA because we crossed 20,000. We're actually at 21,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. So the next episode that you see, hopefully before New Year's, is going to be the Ask Me Anything episode. So if you have any other questions that you didn't get in the last one, please just drop them in the comments right here. I will take them down and I will do my best to answer you. See you guys next week.